This episode is brought to you by Hired.com. Searching for a new job can feel stressful, scary, and time-consuming. Pushy recruiters try to sell you on roles that you don't actually want, and job boards make you feel like you're throwing your resume into a black hole, never to be seen again. Sometimes you go all the way through an interview process just to find out at the very end that the salary offer or company culture doesn't match what you're looking for. Hired is the world's most intelligent talent matching platform for full-time and contract opportunities in engineering, development, design, product management, data science, sales, and marketing. We make your job search faster, focused, and stress-free. Instead of endlessly applying to companies and hoping for the best, Hired puts you in control of when and how you connect with compelling new opportunities. After completing one simple application, top employers apply to hire you. On Hired, you receive personalized interview requests and upfront salary information so you can make informed decisions about which opportunities to pursue over a condensed timeline. Throughout the process, your dedicated talent advocate will have your back, providing unbiased career coaching to help you put your best foot forward with potential employers. Hired offers access to 4,000 plus innovative employers, including big brands such as Facebook and smaller emerging startups. The size and type of company you want to connect with is totally up to you. We help people find new opportunities in 17 major cities in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Open to relocation? Let us know. Your privacy and autonomy in your job search is of utmost importance to us. That's why Hired hides your profile from your current and past employers. The best part is it's always free for you to find your next job on Hired, no exceptions. We pay you to get hired. Today's listeners can earn double our normal $1,000 hiring bonus by signing up with the show's link. That's right, earn $2,000 for finding your next chapter on Hired. Visit hired.com/reactnativeradio to learn more. This episode is brought to you by dailydrip.com. Daily Drip makes keeping up to date on programming skills easier. You already know how much time it takes to find good resources and learn new languages. What if the hard part of that was already done for you? Sign up for Daily Drip and pick a topic that you want to learn about. Want to learn React Native? How about Elm? Maybe you want to brush up on your CSS and HTML. Every weekday, you'll get a short video or reading delivered to you via email. The best part is it only takes 5 minutes a day. We have a special coupon code just for React Native Radio listeners. If you sign up using the coupon code RNRadio, all one word, you'll save $9 on your first month, which means you can try out the React Native topic for free. Don't forget to use the coupon code RNRadio to show support for our podcast. Make learning part of your daily routine with dailydrip.com. Hello, welcome to episode 48 of React Native Radio. I'm your host, Nader Dabit. Today on our panel, we have Peter Pikarczyk.
Hey, everybody.
Ali Najafizadeh.
Hello, guys.
Today, we're going to be just having a discussion between ourselves. We've taken some questions over the last couple of hours on Twitter, on Reddit, and via email. And I've also accumulated a few questions over the last couple of weeks from people that I've spoken with that just kind of want to hear us discuss different things about React Native and just hear our feedback on those. So we're going to kind of go over all of those during this episode. So I guess to kick things off, the first question that we have is this. Do you guys have any techniques for dealing with animated state changes? Say record A is selected and visible on the screen, and user selects record B, but A should slide out and then B slide in, perhaps simultaneously. Clearly, the app's state, likely Redux, should update to B immediately, but A is still required for view generation. How would you tackle this? Peter, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, so the first thing that sort of comes to mind, right, if I can give you any analogy, is let's go back to like jQuery, right? If you have something that needs to happen that affects the view, you could use like add class or remove class, right? Let's say, on page load, you add some class that delays the actual viewing of the page, right? Like the opacity is 0 on the body. And what do? You add a jQuery class that'll make the opacity 1 over 500 milliseconds, right? So let's kind of talk about that, right? You may have added the class, right? But that doesn't mean the animation is finished, right? So you've got your application logic, and then you've sort of got this like animation logic too, right?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Like the Redux state should be immediate, but that doesn't mean that animation is, right? So depending on how you want these animations to work, this example sort of makes me think, like routing and just like pushing a new route on, right? And like seeing the animation happen, right? Sort of if you've used React Native Router Flux, for example, you can sort of see that stuff in action, right? But just to kind of wrap it up, what I'm trying to get at is let the animation handle that part, right? Use like React Animated or a similar library and just set the start and stop of what you want it to be, and then use the Redux props that get passed down to sort of handle the start and stop for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've actually had to do this a couple of times. And the way I have, at least in React Native, in React, I believe we've done this through CSS and doing like CSS animations using just straight up classes. With React Native, we've done some stuff with component will receive props and then doing animated timings based on the prop change that's coming in. So that's one way to handle it. So basically, you would basically have some type of class like toggled or whatever, and then you would that would be changed in Redux. It would come down through your props, and at least the way we've done it, I'm not sure if this is the best way or not. We would basically check there and see if the props is toggled. If it is, then we would animate out a certain view and then animate in another view, and you can kind of handle all that timing within the component. It's not going to be a stateless component. It's probably going to be like a React class, but that's kind of the way we've done it. So that would be one way to handle it.
Well, to add one thing to what Peter said, I think what I usually do for this type of animation, I usually not put it into Redux, because for me, Redux is for my business logic. And as soon as I jump into the animation, I would rather control the animations with the component state. And because it's basically part of that component and it has nothing to do with other components, so it doesn't actually affect any other component, even though it does that animation. But it's basically usually a put, and it makes it a little bit easier to deal with, because if I want to change the animation, I could just basically jump into that component. I'll take a look at the state of that component, and I know exactly what happened. Also, if you really want to do the animation, the animated API has series and also parallelized animation. So you can basically attach a couple of animations, sequence that you want to do, and you just basically let the animated API take over. And one of the things that animated API provide is a function callback that you can basically pass it to start function. And once the animation is done, that callback will be called. And then you know exactly when the animation is finished. And then you can change the internal state of your application. And then you can move on to the next level of animations if you really want to control it. So take a look at the animated API in more details. And I think there are a lot of blog posts talking about, I think, Nader is also post and kind of like example of working with the animated API. You can take a look at that one. But that's what I actually do.
Okay, cool. I guess we'll jump to the next question, or it's kind of like more of like a talking point. It would be awesome to highlight some of the most popular community or core packages for animation, navigation, data visualization, etc. So I guess kind of what are our favorite packages that we kind of use a lot in real life work and things that have come in handy. I guess, Ali, do you want to jump this question off?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I used to work with was React Motion. That one was pretty good before animated API has come along. It's the pure JavaScript, similar as animated API. But recently, animated API is also, well, one of the things that I really want to enforce people to use is first try to use the core API. Don't try to find a project outside of the core. One of the reasons is the core keeps maintaining the projects every 2 weeks. So you always get the benefit of the performance and everything. If you didn't find anything, try to find something that actually uses the animated API, but it gives you more advantage. And then in other case, you can just basically start using the React animation. React animation is pretty good. I encourage people to actually take a look at it. That's what I like before Animated API. I used to use React animation or React Motion. Yeah, it was React Motion.
I guess for me, what I've been really enjoying lately at work is CodePush. We've been using CodePush for a long time now, but we just implemented it into a new project, and we launched the project, and it's just so nice to be able to send updates just on the fly. Like, we had a very minor bug that normally would have been a big, app update process through the iTunes Connect and all that. So we just went to the JavaScript, changed the file, bundled the bundle, and then sent it away. And literally within about a minute or two, we were able to see the change on the app, which was really nice. So I would check out CodePush. React Native Vector Icons is probably my favorite package because I just use it in pretty much everything. I actually use it in React Native Elements. I use it in pretty much all my projects, and they do a great job maintaining it as well. React Native Video is great. I know a lot of the stuff that Exponent puts out. I would check out their repos and see all the stuff that they have going on. They're super nice. And this isn't really a React Native module, but I was reading on Twitter today that they've updated the React Native upgrade process, and I believe starting in version 0.40, there's going to be a seamless upgrade process. It's going to be completely different than the way they've been doing it in the past, which is going to be great because, as anyone that's tried to upgrade has found out, that's probably one of the stickiest parts of working with React Native is upgrading a version from one version to the other, especially if you're working with a lot of native stuff. If you've written some Objective-C or Java, a lot of times upgrading is just a little bit of a pain in the butt. So it looks like it was put together by Nicholas Couillery of a company called Zenica, but it's going to be merged into the main React Native project. Has anyone seen that today, that blog post?
No, I didn't. Yeah, one of the problem with the React Native upgrade was it was a very simple process. It's just basically replacing all your files with the new file without changing it. So if you're changing the app delegate as an example, as soon as you do this, it just blindly, they just replace it with a new version of it. So you lose all the logics that you already wrote. So that was just a problem that I had with the upgrade feature of React Native. Hopefully with this version, it would be a lot better so they can understand the code. So they don't actually... I think the way that they're going to do it probably is just using some sort of like a merge feature from Git, probably. I'll have to dive into it. But yeah, it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's what they are doing exactly. That sounds about what I kind of got the idea from reading their blog posts talking about it.
So some of the things that I use on a daily basis, I like to, as cliche as it sounds, I like to get stuff done, right? So I use a lot of starter kits. Obviously, people hate that word, or boilerplates or whatever, but once you sort of figure out like the certain kit that you want, you can find that same stuff somewhere else, right? So example of starter kits that I use Exponent.js all the time, right? If you haven't heard of it, get exponent.com. Why is it nice? Because it takes care of a lot of this BS-y stuff for you, right? Using custom fonts, using, like routing and navigation, being able to deploy to both the iOS and Android App Store, dealing with push notifications. If you've ever had to deal with push notifications on Android, it was sort of a nightmare for me because I had to use GCM, FCM, older version of React Native, like 0.27. We were using something called OneSignal, so we could just handle push notifications on our own. And it was an absolute nightmare. It wasn't easy, at the very least. I was getting a lot of weird issues with multi-dex files freaking out and overloading, or, loading the same Google classes, out of nowhere, right? Like, I have very, I don't have much experience with building Android apps, so that was tough on me. I've also used React Native Ignite. If you haven't heard of that, that one's awesome. It sets up all this stuff for you, including like internationalization, routing, let's see, vector icons. There's like,
Oh yeah, Ignite is amazing, and I would definitely also recommend that one because they're continuing to maintain it. And from what I understand, they're about to release a new version that has a lot of crazy, cool things that are going to be going on that I probably don't know enough about to talk about. But like, it would be something that if you kind of got to know, it would be a good thing for the future. But continue on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
oh yeah, of course. Yeah, so React Native Ignite is awesome. And it's not to say that you can't use Exponent with Ignite, right? Like as long as it's pure JavaScript, right? Which for the most part it is, you should be okay. What else? So I'm still sort of stuck in this whole old school way of thinking, right? So I may not be using all like the latest features always. So like React Native Router Flux, if I have to do something on my own, I always use that. Things that I don't always use, Redux, for example. Sometimes I let each screen handle its own state. I'm sure that may seem
You
weird,
animal.
but excuse me?
I said
I
you're an
know.
animal.
I'm an animal, right? But sometimes that makes more sense for me, you know? Sometimes
No, I'm just joking. I agree 100%. Redux is great, but it's totally overkill for a lot of things. So
yeah, sometimes I like to just like build it in myself if it means getting it done faster, you know? Like Redux is great, but I can just do like a return fetch dot then, you know, this dot set state data, you know, you got your loading indicator, you've got everything you need, right? And it's sure it's encapsulated in that view, but I don't need it anywhere else. So, you know, why hoist all these things into your application, you know, just to make one thing a little easier, you know?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just I'm sorry, Nader, but just come back to your like easy to use project or modules or anything else. Like if you really want to not use Redux, but you want to have some sort of like a state management, I'm still pushing people try to use MobX. Like give MobX a chance, and then you will basically. I'm a big fan of Redux. I'm not saying that Redux is bad, but as soon as you start using MobX, you never go back to Redux. Like as soon as you use it, like imagine it comes with the performance, everything. Like it automatically fixes that and makes sure that your component is basically being rendered properly, and it automatically add should component update for you. So by default, you get the performance that you needed for your app, and it's super simple to use. It is by far my favorite library for state management. And I encourage people to just, for a small project, just give it a shot. You might like even for animation, I would basically tell people, even though I was basically telling people that, like at the very beginning, that I would definitely add it into the state, but like a component of state. But if I have to use MobX, like if I have a chance to use the MobX, I would definitely put all the animation logic in MobX. It makes it super easy.
So how would that work as far as MobX and animations are concerned? Because I love MobX too, and I think that's one of the problems that I ran into, and I didn't quite spend the time to figure it out. So I'm kind of curious how you went about, handling that.
So usually when you do this, like usually you add, so in MobX, you can have as many stores as you want. And it sounds a little bit crazy. And people thought that, I have one store and then it just basically, it's easier for me to maintain. But when you're actually breaking down the stores into small pieces, and then your component is basically subscribed. It's something like, what was the reselect Redux on a steroid? Imagine you don't actually need to write any queries on anything. I think the best example I can tell you is the difference between the Backbone and Angular, and why Angular was suddenly the most popular libraries. Because what it does is just basically hides a lot of things that you don't need to know. You just want to finish your application. But with the Backbone, you have a lot of power, but you have to do a lot of work. So to me, Redux is similar to kind of like a Backbone. And MobX is a little bit towards the Angular. So it basically does a lot of things behind the scene that you don't need to know. Like, for example, you want to subscribe to specific changes. Let's say I want to push something into a to-do list. And as soon as that one happens, I want to be notified. So what happened is you just basically put a decorator on top of it. And it's called observer. So observer means anything happen inside this component. And if I use one of the observable variable inside this component, I want to call the render. And it actually makes it a lot easier to reason about. So you simply do to-do list as an example dot for each, and then just or map, and then you're just basically building your list out of your to-do list. And as soon as somebody else pushing into that one, to that specific store, MobX knows that your component is it's kind of like a need to be rendered. So instead of a chain, basically props down all the logics down into your component, it just directly call that a specific component, and it will basically render. So to you, it feels like a top-down model, but behind the scene, MobX skip a lot of components in middle because they realize that they don't need to basically render all those components. And it just basically jump down into the specific component that you're using observable. And the best part of it is it comes with a very interesting dev tool. And what it does is it tells you which component is basically being rendered. So you can optimize your applications a lot better. So it basically gives you a counter and tell you, oh, because you're changing a list, the way that you structure your code, the entire, all of your component is basically being rendered. So you can tweak it a little bit by just moving the observable around, and then you can just basically rendering the only child inside your component. So it makes it a lot easier to work with. At the beginning, it's a little bit different, but as soon as you start using it, it makes a lot of sense. Look, for example, in the company that I'm working at, like in Presley, we have around probably 60 stores. And it's not that scary. Like our applications is very complex. But if I want to modify a specific logic, I know which store I have to take a look. So I jump into that store and then I start modifying that store, and then I come back. And I know that it's just basically propagated properly through the entire system. So there are others kind of like an architecture that people are using. As an example, you can use a domain store and also UI store. So domain store is what it does is it doesn't actually do any effects. So it doesn't actually do any API call, but the UI store connects to domain store, and they are maintaining and they talking to the API, or they want to do some sort of like a side effect. So as soon as they do the side effect, they basically tell the domain store that, oh, by the way, I added a new list into to-do list. So whoever is consuming from that can actually be notified. So your UI store never talks to each other. They basically talking to the domain store, and then domain store it becomes kind of like the holder of your data. So it makes it a little. You have to play around with it, and I encourage people to actually start using it.
So I guess as far as data management, there's really two options that are mainly, like I would say, consume at least 80 to 90% of the market, and that's basically Redux or MobX. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's true. But MobX is, I think the creator of MobX, he's trying to push people to use it. And I think because of Facebook and also the creator of Redux, they basically pushing a Redux, and then Facebook by basically saying that, oh, we are actually using a Redux or Flux system into our code base. Then people are looking at the Facebook and say, oh yeah, we're going to follow the Redux because it's actually more trusted way. And I completely agree. But if you try, if you start using a MobX, you will realize that, okay, let me just give you another example. Our code base was around 50,000 lines of JavaScript with Redux. We had a very large code base. And then we decided to In a month, we convert the entire thing into MobX. So that's actually really easy to move from Redux to MobX. And then we are fairly small team size. Like we have only 4 people that working on it. And we reduced the code size to around, I believe, 12,000. So it is a significant difference. But one thing you should notice, we didn't add any complexity into the code base. It actually makes us a lot faster. And then we managed to add more logic into our app that we never thought we could be able to do it with Redux. So these are the things that we are using. And then we are extremely happy with MobX.
Yeah, I've used MobX as well, and I felt like it was almost too easy. I was like, is there something I'm missing here? Because everything just worked with almost zero boilerplate. And it was very nice, especially coming from Redux land, which requires quite a bit of boilerplate, but it also just works really great. But I felt like MobX was really refreshing to work with. So I would also recommend people to check that out.
Yeah, it's basically, I'm telling people, like, if you don't use MobX or Redux at all, I would definitely recommend to use Redux first, because what Redux does is it tells you how to structure your code base. It basically enforces you to do this. And then once you learn Redux properly, like how to use reselect, how to use a proper query, how to basically maintaining your estate, how does the action works. Like once you fully understand the Redux, then you can jump into MobX, and then you will see it's kind of like a training your brain with Redux and then jump into the MobX. And as soon as you jump into the MobX, you can actually use the full potential of MobX. So that's my suggestion to everyone.
Okay, I guess the next question is Realm versus Redux persist and async storage. So basically, I guess the idea is what do you use for local storage? And I've used Realm before, just learning it, and it was very nice to work with. But I haven't run into any issues where I actually need that type of encryption. And I've had very good experience so far just using the async storage so far. I have not used Redux persist, but it looks like it is built on top of async storage. So I'm going to see if maybe Ali or Peter have more to say about this subject.
So I haven't used Realm in a production environment. I have played around with it just like yourself, and it's fun. It's super fast too. It makes things a lot easier for me for sure. But just like based on like what I was saying earlier, with me kind of like trying to move as fast as I can, I usually just end up using async storage, right? So Realm gives you a better API, more speed, and it's a lot faster than async storage is. But for my cases, I don't really save too much. You know, like I may save, you know, some user information or whatever. So the benchmarks for me, you know, don't make that big of a difference. In terms of Redux persist, it's pretty cool. It could bite you in the butt sometimes when you want to make a request and that information is already there, right? So like sort of cache invalidation. But what Redux persist does is it'll save your entire state to async storage or to Realm or wherever you'd like it to go. You can actually you can use Redux persist both for React Native and normal React, and they offer a variety of choices for what you can kind of save that to.
Yeah, I've never used Realm. Usually, our application is very basic. Our mobile application is really focused on streaming the data, so we never actually had to store anything into local storage. I think the only time I used local storage was just storing the session, the user session. So as soon as they logged in, they just basically store it into the local storage. And so as soon as they open our app again, I was basically looking into it. I did not spend too much on it. As soon as I saw it, that is already provided by Core, I said, yeah, I'm going to use the Core feature. But if somebody wants, as Peter says, if somebody wants security or they have a specific needs for speed, so they want to do some sort of like a query on mobile, then I guess I definitely encourage people to use Realm.
Okay, cool. And I guess we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. It is selling my company on React Native. I'm not sure if this means selling, I'm guessing maybe the company he works for, that React Native is the right choice, but I'm guessing that's kind of the idea. So what do you recommend, I guess, as far as like approaching your manager or someone in a company and kind of talking to them about using React Native?
It's a tough one, especially if you have a in-house mobile app team. It's always going to be hard to sell React Native when you've got a native developer who isn't interested in the product, right? Because he or she's not going to use it. Your CEO will delegate to that individual, right? And if you do it from you work at the company, right, you're going to have to do all of the work to get the React Native app up and running, right? You will. Nobody else will do it. You're going to have to sell the company on it, right? So chances are you're going to be doing a lot of stuff outside of the 9 to 5 to get it there, right? And then it just depends on how badly you want it. From a consulting perspective, it gets a little harder too with the same points. If they've already got a native developer in-house, what happens when they want to make updates to the app and you're not there anymore? What happens when, the other developer has some free time and wants to help you out or whatever, right? It gets a little weird. There's some friction there. So if you want to sell it as a consultant, you really have to sell it, right? You should have at least a few other apps in mind. You should have some quick demos. Maybe walk into that, let's call it a sales pitch, right? You're selling yourself as a consultant. Walk in with a quick mock-up that you put together, right, for them. Sure, it's free work, but if you're an individual, React Native is new. It's hard, and a lot of people still haven't heard about it. So it's kind of hard to sell something that new, right? A lot of people are still scared that it's not quote unquote production ready, right? Strictly from the version number, right? So it's an uphill battle, but not an impossible one.
Also, to add one more thing is, for some reason, people afraid of JavaScript. They don't trust JavaScript. They believe that JavaScript is not good for production. Even though a lot of people are actually writing a JavaScript for production, they still especially for enterprise company, they usually want to go with the native, and they thought that, okay, native is faster, which is faster, but a little bit faster. But you just have to tell them that this is not Cordova. This is not actually running on a web view. And this is kind of like a miscommunications that still people are asking me, it's JavaScript. It's running on it's a single thread application. It's going to be similar to Cordova app, which is on top of a web view. And I keep telling people, yes, it is actually, for some reason, like if you really want to, there is a web view behind the scene that runs the JavaScript on it. But remember, JavaScript is not doing the UI, and web view is not doing the UI. We just basically sending a signal to the native code that controls the UI. And people are still skeptical about this one. And I think that would be a little bit hard if you start telling people that, okay, I'm actually going to write a JavaScript for you, which is provided by React Native. I guess, as Peter said, the best way to do it is create some really, really good animations with the React Native, like a demo, and then show it to them, and then just basically say, yeah, this is what I can do, and I can do it in that amount of time. And if you want to do it, this type of animations in native on both Android and iOS, it will take you at least that amount of time with that many developers on both platforms. But I can do it only that's going to be the sell point.
Yeah, I agree. I think with everything you guys just said, and I think the one thing I would even go further on and elaborate is kind of the cost savings as far as the quality is concerned. So like you said, it's not going to be quite there as far as comparing to native, but it's literally like as close as you're going to get without it being native. And in fact, the last app we built for our company, you cannot tell that it's not native. But we're not doing we're doing quite a few animations, honestly, but we're not doing any like physics, gaming, stuff like that. Back to the point, I guess, is if you wanted to write all this code on Android and then on iOS separately, it would cost you a lot more time and therefore money. And then if you've priced native developers lately as opposed to JavaScript developers are not getting any cheaper, but they're not as expensive as native developers. So the fact that you can hire someone for a little cheaper and then deliver both platforms is a really good selling point. As far as my experience, both within my own company and when I'm dealing with clients. I think the number one thing that I always talk about when I'm meeting clients is kind of the fact that all these other large companies are getting on board. A lot of big banks are starting to use it. Of course, Airbnb, Facebook, and all these other companies as well, and Walmart and whatever. So that's another thing to bring up. Like, hey, all these other companies are using it, and the performance and the cost benefit and before you know it, it's kind of a very viable option. But it is still new, like Peter said. So if you have someone that's skeptical, they might not ever be able to be sold on something until it's been around for a little longer. Okay, so I guess the next question is something I know nothing about, but maybe Peter or Ali can talk about this. It's React Fiber and its effect on React Native. Have you guys looked into React Fiber enough to kind of know what's going on there with that project or with that update, I guess, to React?
What React Fiber will be is, so it's like the new reconciliation engine, right? You won't really notice, and I'm probably wrong about this, but this is sort of like what I've been reading about. There's obviously going to be changes that will affect all of us as consumers, but a lot of it, what's happening is behind the scenes, right? With how everything works, right? A lot of the features that people have wanted, like how you have to wrap everything on like a div if you've got a few components, for example, right? I believe React Fiber will fix that, so it will no longer be an issue. You will have better like debugging features and error reporting, and just like being able to follow the stack trace for real, right? Like we're slowly starting to see that in these newer iterations of React, and I'm assuming that same stuff will apply to React Native. But outside of
that, man, that is exciting stuff right there. Everything you just said sounds awesome.
Yeah. Outside of that, I'm not really sure, but everything else, yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff. Andrew Clark, who actually got a job at Facebook, he's github.com/ACDLite. He's the one that co-authored Redux with Dan Abramov. Not many people know that, but also a very sharp person. He has a whole GitHub README for how React Fiber works. And if you're interested to learn more, and you want to be at the cutting edge, you could read through a lot of the decisions they make in the PRs. So I'll follow along, and I'll see what Dan, Andrew, and Sebastian all have to say on something. And it's kind of cool to follow their thought process.
Yeah, I think as Peter says, everything, one of the things that I really want to see from React and also React Fiber is some sort of detach the actual reconciliation. So I can basically plug and play with the different implementation. That's because I think when React was around at version 12, there was another project it's called Virtual DOM. And if you actually compare it with the Virtual DOM and React, Virtual DOM was a lot faster. And I wish that React was kind of constructed in such a way that I can use the Virtual DOM, but I still can use the React API by myself. So I just basically swap the engine, but I still use the same API. I hope they thinking about this type of approach, so they don't actually put their own engine and then said, yeah, this is our engine. Nobody can actually change it. If you really want to change it, you can just give us a pull request. I really want to see, if they do this, then React will definitely will with us for at least a couple of years. But if they don't do it and then they just basically pushing it on their own end, then I believe we might somebody's gonna fork it. It's similar to Node that somebody actually fork it on a weekend and they call it a IOJS, and then suddenly everyone jumps into the IOJS because they hated the way that Node was actually going back in a couple of years ago. I guess 2 years ago. I hope it never happens to React. I hope they doing some way that the community actually helping to build a better engine. So it's just basically creating some sort of like a competition between the companies. But everyone is kind of like everyone is using the React as kind of like a standard. I believe React is similar. It will be, and I think it's better than Web Component, I believe, even though Web Component has a lot of things. But to be honest with you, nobody's actually using Web Component anymore except maybe a couple of people. I don't want to bash Web Component, but yeah, React is the best so far, and hope they keep it the best.
I wonder about if Preact, and once the new Fiber implementation of React comes along, will Preact still be a thing, or do you think Preact will one day overtake React, or will they merge into one project, or are they completely different things? I don't know a lot about Preact, but I believe we had a question about it. Let me see here. Oh, yeah, there was a question about, can you use Preact with React Native? So I guess this general discussion can move to, what do we know about Preact? And from what I understand, it's just a simplified version of React without a lot of the ES5 functionality and things like that. So there's just less code, but it has the same API. But I could be completely off about this because I've never used it. So I'm wondering, Peter or Ali, have you guys had any, experience with Preact? And do you think the new version of React is going to be similar to what they've done with Preact?
Well, so Preact has like a very similar API, right? And it uses the VDOM, right? The virtual DOM. I don't think you could use Preact with React Native. I mean, you already are if you're using, if you are using React with React Native, right? There's a lot that React Native does under the hood to get it working, and I don't know if you could, to be honest. That one's a tough one. I'm sure someone may get it working, but I guess I would wonder, why.
Yeah, you don't actually gain anything unless the reconciliations engine of the pure React would be very, very good. On React Native, size doesn't really matter. Size the file of your JavaScript doesn't really matter. Maybe the load time is going to take maybe, I don't know, maybe adds to 20 milliseconds. That is completely negligible to the performance. But other than that, for React Native, I don't think it gives you any benefit other than it gives you a little bit better API. You might certainly get a lot of benefit if you actually use it in web, because the client downloads less code and you have a better API, and then you can just basically do a little bit more stuff. But on React Native side, I don't think it's a good idea for now. And as Peter said, maybe somebody is going to do it. And I'm pretty sure somebody already did it. But I don't think it's a right things to do for the production.
Okay. So I guess the next question is this. Creating an open source project for React Native. I guess just creating an open source project in general, but I guess for React Native specifically, I guess, Ali, do you want to start off with this? I know you had mentioned that you're working on something that you may be releasing soon, and I know you have quite a few projects out there. Can you kind of give people out there that are listening an idea of how to create their first project and release it? Because I know when I first did that myself, I didn't know a lot about how NPM worked as far as submitting projects. I'd only use NPM to consume them. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and React Native in particular.
So I guess what I usually do is, first, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. And that's the things. Everyone wants to become famous. Everyone wants to get a lot of GitHub stars. But first, take a look. A lot of people actually get famous by just contributing into an existing project. So if you really see that there is no project or there is no modules that you have. I think there are around like almost 200,000 npm modules that you can actually search. So probably by now, whatever you think, somebody already created. So instead of kind of like wasting the time and yourself, it's a good learning curve to learn something and then you can publish it. I'm not basically telling people not to publish, but if you actually find a project and that you actually like it, try to contribute it rather than just fork it and basically rename it into different things. Now, the second thing is, as soon as you find that there is no project that you like, there is no modules that you really need, what I usually do is I'm basically looking for a really good name. And to be honest with you, finding a really good name for the project is a little bit hard because I don't want to basically call it React Native 5. It doesn't tell people what does the React Native 5 does. Like if somebody actually read it, it's like, what the heck is this? So look for a name and then take a look at the npm to see if that name is already taken. If it's not taken, usually what I do is I'll do a little bit of cheat. I usually use a package.json with the empty one with the version 0.0.0 with that name, and I just basically publish it. So I can take that name for my project. And then I start.
Oh, good idea.
And then I start using that project. I start implementing it. So I know that that name is reserved for me and nobody can actually take it. And then once I finish the project, I publish it. And then in order for me to get some feedback from community, usually I post it on Twitter. Facebook is not a really good platform for these type of things. Usually I post it on Twitter or Hacker News. And these two platforms are really good because as soon as you post it and then you did something really interesting, people will come and they start testing your code. And you don't believe it. Like if you go back to, I guess I was reading a story behind Babel, and Sebastian was talking about it. He said, yeah, I just basically wanted to use ES6, but I couldn't. So I implement a little bit of the code and I publish it. And then the next day, 10 people actually messaged me. They said, yeah, your project is cool. And I want to add this modules into my things. Can you do it for me? And then he started adding more modules into it. So you will be surprised that people will find you and then will actually help you. And then they will test you. And then don't be afraid of issues. Try to answer all the issues as much as possible. And if it gets too noisy, try to find the most people that actually contribute to your projects and try to add them as a contributor. And then let them control your project. And then you will be surprised that it's actually really enjoyable if you really want to do that. Other than that, maybe Peter has something to say about it. But this is kind of like my experience about the open source project.
Yeah, and I guess as far as like technically publishing your first project, I think all you have to do is you create, a new npm, a new package.json with npm init. You put a version number in there and you put the name of the project, I believe, and then you type npm publish and I think that is about it. Is that right, Ali?
Yeah, that is correct. And usually start with the 0.0.0 and then npm will accept that. Because remember, once you publish something into npm, it's very hard to take it down. And it's kind of like impossible unless you actually delete the project. So don't start with the 0.0.1. Start with the 0.00. So even people actually come to npm and they don't see anything, as soon as they see the version number is 0.0.0, it means that okay, there's nothing here. I'm not gonna check out the
I'm not going to send a issue.
Yeah.
Because there's no code.
Yeah, so that's usually what I do. And in terms of the React Native part, there is a really good tutorial on React Native website on a native module and a native UI modules. I definitely tell people to just take a look at that one to start implementing it. And as I discussed with you guys, I've been it's hard for a lot of maintainers, especially on React Native, to maintain both language like Java and Objective-C or Swift. And every time the React Native changes, I believe every 2 weeks we have a new version. It kind of like hard for us to maintain the code. So recently, I started using a Go Mobile. I'm a big fan of Golang. So apparently, using a Go Mobile with the Golang with both platform iOS and Android is super easy. So at the end of the day, you're maintaining only one code, but you can actually publish it on both platforms. So no more Java, no more Objective-C. And I'm on the process of open sourcing one of our internal tools that we are actually using. We will definitely publish it on NPM, and then I will announce it either on Desktop Radio or on Twitter or even on both by next week. And hopefully people can actually start using it. But for now, it's a little bit of secret.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing about that and actually using it. One thing I'll note is something I learned from reading all of the open source projects from Exponent, and also from dealing with just my project and using it and testing it and developing it in general, is I'm used to compiling my JavaScript on the web, and using Babel and all that stuff. And I've realized that at least by looking at what Exponent's been doing and my own experience, is I just actually have been using just the regular source and not compiling it, and actually just open sourcing just the raw code. And I don't know if that's something that everyone else does. I haven't really looked at enough React Native projects, but I know I still see a lot of compiled stuff. But I've just noticed that it's really easy to test because you don't have to have any special configuration. You just download your project and you can start testing it right away, and you don't have to worry about any compilation. And I guess if you had an extremely large project, that might not be a good idea or something like that, but I don't really know if that would even matter. But basically what I do is just, have my source directory, and I have all my code there. And anyone that wants to look at the source code, they can very easily do so either through their Node modules, and they can actually go into Node modules and make changes and submit pull requests a lot easier as well. What are your guys' takes on that?
I would definitely do it. Like in React Native, it would actually makes it a lot easier, even for debugging purposes. Because if something is crashing and you're actually using the source rather than just the bundle, at least the red screen will tell you which line of which module is going to actually, it breaks it. So you can basically take a look at that module and you can figure out why it's actually happening. So it makes it a lot easier. And in terms of the performance, I don't think it's going to reduce the performance at all, because at the end of the day, React Native is going to bundle everything and then minify everything and then compress everything for you. And then as soon as you go to the production, so there is no more source or anything left. But for debugging, I would definitely tell people don't minify it and publish it into the NPM, because most of the people are actually need to debug it. And then it's actually a really good way of doing this.
Yeah, it's funny that size doesn't matter as much as it does on web, right? What's 2 megabytes? You know what I'm saying? For React Native, your app is already going to be 50 or 60. What's an extra 2 on a high-speed connection?
Okay, so the last question is about React Native and consulting. I guess just in general about how to go about, I guess, either running a consulting business or being a freelancer and dealing with clients in general. So I guess, Peter, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, so I did a lot of React Native consulting, through bigger consulting companies and on my own directly. Personally, it's not something that I was particularly interested in. I'm just a disclaimer. I've realized it wasn't for me, only because I've got the need to continually keep learning, where with consulting, you walk in as the expert and you have to have everything figured out, right? I mean, that's not always the case, right? You're not, no one's, someone is paying you for your brain power and time, right? Obviously, you won't have the answer to everything, but you are considered the expert, right? You can't bill to, well, and let me also preface this. This is with smaller consulting gigs. We're talking, you're building an app for a startup, you're coming in to help rewrite something or whatever. For smaller companies where you might get paid between, $5,000 and $10,000, for example, right? This changes with bigger companies. I'll always recommend, if you're going to do any consulting, work for a bigger company, because then no matter what, you'll get paid, depending on how you structure your contract, you'll get paid 40 hours a week of time every single week, right? As a consultant that comes in and works with the team. But if you're building an application or you're helping rewrite something, that's not usually the case. You can always say that's the case, that you've got limited time, but chances are what's going to happen is you're going to put in way more time than you originally agreed upon, just to kind of satisfy the customer, right? Small startups don't have a lot of money. They're obviously pulling you in because they need a hand, but don't expect praise when you go, 20, 30, 40 hours over budget to fix something, right? Like it's just not going to happen. Especially with React Native, because it's such a new project. People are still learning about it. You're not going to get a lot of referrals, if you're taking more time than you should have, or, like you're charging for debugging issues for these smaller companies, right? So that's definitely something to keep in mind. If you want, some great examples of how people are doing it, right? Like look at our very own Natter, with like the React Native Radio and blog posts and everything else that he's working on, right? Look at Mike Grabowski, for example, same idea, right? Get close to the React Native open source project, do whatever you can, come up with, your own open source repos, and you will get the type of work that you want, right? But if you're approaching small companies and saying, hey, I want to build this for you in React Native, you're going to have a harder time doing it.
Yeah, I agree. That's all exactly about right. As far as coming in as the expert, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing as a consultant. They don't want to hire an employee and train them for 3 to 6 months on whatever it is that they're using, and then keep them on the payroll. When they hire a consultant, you get paid a lot more than the average employee because you are the expert, and you're supposed to hit the ground running. And like you said, it's also, as far as like getting leads, the best way, at least in my opinion right now, is a combination of blogging and just getting your name out there in general. And I that can be through blogging or open source projects, or speaking, or holding meetups, or just contributing to the community and somehow maybe going on YouTube and making a bunch of videos. Just any of that type of stuff all makes sense, or even contributing to existing projects. And when people jump on your GitHub repo, they see that you've, contributed to React Native or some other high-profile project. They're going to automatically assume that you're an expert, and you probably are if you're doing that type of stuff anyway, at least to the average person compared to the average person. So, okay, cool. I guess we'll go ahead and get to the picks. Ali, do you have any picks tonight?
Since I'm actually working on a Go Mobile, I definitely tell people to take a look at the Go Mobile. Also, at Presley, like the company that I'm actually working at, we have a specific platform for Golang. And then we post a lot of good articles about Golang. So if somebody wants to actually learn it, they can go to golang.to, because we are based in Toronto. So that's the website that people should, if you really want to learn Go, we post daily about the Go community and what actually happens. And recently I found a new article and I posted there. It's about to use the Go Mobile with the React Native. I definitely tell people to check it out, and then check out the golang.to if you really want to keep up with the Golang community and also the open source projects.
Awesome. Yeah. And also recommend people to just check out the Presley repo in general, because they have a lot of cool stuff in there, a lot of nice open source projects. Okay, Peter, do you have any picks?
My immediate pick, because this is what I've been doing, is React Native Ignite. I know we mentioned it previously, and I know we've had them on the show, but I'd just like to stress how awesome and how easy it's been to get something up and running very quickly for both iOS and Android.
Awesome. +1 on Ignite. Infinite Red. Infinite Red is the company behind Ignite. They're doing the React Native conference in Portland this year, and they do all kinds of crazy cool stuff. Reactatron, and I know they have a few other things in the works right now. My picks are going to be, the first one is Zeit. I'm not sure if I've talked about Zeit.co or not, but they have that now hosting platform that's similar to Heroku, but for Node.js. And I've been using it, and I did a presentation on now using Next, which is Next is like the JavaScript framework that Now put out that does server-side rendering, but it also does prefetching based on links that are on the page. So if you have like a link to the next page, at least from what I understand, it goes ahead and prefetches that. And then when you click on it, it's almost instantaneous, even though it is server-side rendering. But it's also a good way to get server-side rendering up and running very easily using React. So Zeit is the company. They have a few different products. One of them is Now. It's basically, like I said, an easy way to deploy through the cloud, similar to Heroku, but in my opinion, much nicer, especially for Node.js. My second pick is a repo. It's Tipsy Stripe. It's a React Native Stripe binding for React Native. It's a React Native binding for Stripe. And it's very, very interesting, and it looks really cool. And they have a very well-documented repo, and they seem to be doing a fantastic job. It only has about 13 stars right now, but I hope everyone goes and gives it a look and hope gives it a little bit of love, because it would be nice to have something like this for people to be able to implement payments and stuff like that in React Native. And the last pick is React Native training. I announced that a few weeks ago. We have a few new cities we've announced. We're going to be in Washington, D.C., and Boston and New York the first quarter of next year. And we're also doing a lot of promotion for private training. So if your company needs someone to come on site, we have a few people, me and Mike Grabowski, and we're bringing on one or two more people at the beginning of the year. We're going to be doing professional training on site as well as workshops. So the website is reactnative.training. So go give that a look. Okay, well, that wraps up episode 48 of React Native Radio. Thank you for listening, and we'll see everyone next week.